To Susan Tata. The Africa we want: unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home. Join my voice. Join my team. Join my campaign. Campaign 21 hashtag 1 million subscribers on the Pan African Daily TV YouTube. Be a volunteer. Apply now. Be the new Africa. So, good afternoon, good evening, good day, good night to all of you that are watching us on the Pan African Daily TV from your different destinations. We welcome you to this special edition of the Africa Liberation Week on the Pan African Daily TV 2021. Like we said yesterday, our apologies was the mix-up in the program, and today we're having Professor Oba TShaka live to discuss actually the essence of this week topic, and also to get us into this concept of the mother inspiration between the female gender, according to his book. He's also going to be telling us upcoming events which we think would be necessary for us to collaborate, and so we can stream those programs live on the Pan African Daily TV. So I want to welcome all of you that are signing in. If you're joining from any part of the world, please make sure you click like, subscribe, and share to get updates and program changes in case, but also to get daily news and messages from the Pan African Daily TV. Yeah. So today we are one day close to the Africa Liberation Week 2021, and we've been having exclusive guests on this week to mentor us, teach us a lot. What is it that we actually should know about this day? Because of the confusion that was being, from the topic or the term of the declaration OAU 1963 up to now, there's been a mixture in the name. Is it African Liberation Day? Is it Africa Day? And they are reflections that we're coming up. Is it really what celebrating that we call celebration? Are we totally liberated and free? What is it that we're still having as challenges that we have to know, we have to educate ourselves about? So it has been a very successful week, I must say that. From feedback and indications that we're getting, a lot of people and our viewers that we're following are really impressed with the work, and the thinking, the consciousness grow even more in the essence of actually really knowledge what we should know about this. Like we talked about the Malcolm X Day with Professor James Moore, and yesterday with Rev Shaw, we were talking about the economic liberation and financial freedom in this week. So today we'll also be listening to Professor Oba TShaka on this topic of the African Liberation Week. So I want to welcome all of you and have a nice time with us on the Pan African Daily TV. Over to you, Prof. Good evening and welcome to the show, or good afternoon in your area.
Thank you. It's always good to be on your show, Dr. Tata. You've got a nice spirit. I like you. Conscious
Thank
lady.
you so much.
And anybody that calls this show Pan-African DTV has got to be wide open in terms of their eyes are open. So feel at home when I'm able to exchange with you.
Thank you so much, Prof. We also are always honored to have you here. And last time we talked about a kind of a collaboration where we can stream your own shows and the mentorship programs that you're doing on your YouTube live here. At that time, we had some technical challenges. It was not possible, but now we are ready, from your own side, because you're doing incredible work out there. Can you just give us a feedback of what you've been doing, which topics you've been handling on your channel in these past days?
Yeah, it's really good to have a cooperative relationship. We've been on now for 5 going on 6 months, and we have covered a number of different topics. To begin with, when Trump was running for office, we did a historical rundown on the history of Blacks in the U.S. It was called Lessons from Post-Reconstruction, which was the period in 1876 where they rolled back our rights, even though so-called emancipation had occurred. So we did a thing on lessons for post-Reconstruction, voting Trump out of the White House and putting him in the jailhouse. And I have a cinematographer, so I did a speech, and then I had him come in and do historical background. And so when you see that show, you'll see pictures of blacks fighting in the Civil War, because blacks won the Civil War. 170,000 black Union soldiers made the difference in defeating the South, because up to the time of blacks being involved in the war, the Civil War, the North was losing. They only had one victory. After that, they didn't lose at all, because black men and some black women disguised as men got their trusty Winchester rifles and blew away, that means shot into the ground, their former slave masters. So that one laid out a prediction for how Trump would be defeated. It laid out a prediction that Black Lives Matter, along with COVID, would bury him, which is exactly what happened. So we did a series on that. We've done 5 series on God within, where we look at the powers that African people, but all human beings have. So we looked at this idea of heart-mind, which in ancient Kemet was the idea that God rests in your heart. Studies have been shown recently that show that the heart emits higher brain frequencies than the brain, because the heart is really the central system for your entire body. So, we looked at the idea of the Ba, which is a Kemetic idea of the soul. A lot of people have dreams, their spirits fly. We looked at that. That's a power you have. We looked at the idea that human beings are divine beings in a physical body, and that in heaven we compact a destiny in the presence of God. I know this is true. And so that's called the Ka. Among the Yoruba, it's called the Ori. Among the people from the Akan, Kra or Okra. Same idea. So that means if you look at our gifts, that's really the pathway to why we're here. And if we pursue our gifts, like you're pursuing yours and others pursue theirs, then we are acting as divinities. But this idea that God's within, that's a powerful idea, and I think it's truthful. In fact, God's within everything God created. The energy of God is in a plant. George Washington Carver, the greatest scientist in the 20th century, talked to plants. They talk to him because they have energy. They have healing powers. So there's been 5 series on that. Right now, we're on a historical set of series. Last week was the Twa, the mothers and fathers of humanity, and the mothers and fathers of civilization. The Twa, the European incorrectly called them pygmies. And that's an insulting word, because it suggests that they're dwarfs and they're stunted. They're just small people, but they originate. They are the first people all over the world. We did a survey of that showing, and they're black. They're African people. They're just little people. And then we showed how they civilized the people from your country, the people all over Africa. This is new research that I've been doing on how they brought civilization to the Niger-Congo Bantu region, the Cameroons, to Nigeria, and taught everything, taught fire, taught smelting of iron, taught how to cook food, but most of all taught the spirit powers, how to connect with God. This Saturday, and our shows go on at 10 in the morning, but you can pick it up when you go to the show. And this is the address for the show. I know it's hard to do it any other way. That's the address, and I'll put it up a couple more times.
Yes.
This show, this Saturday, will focus on the Twa, whose name was also Anu, TWA, and whose name is also Anu, ANU, the founders of Kemet, the founders of Egypt. And Dr. Theophilo Benga and Dr. Shaka Diop, when they had their argument with all the Western scholars at UNESCO, that was their argument, that these Twa, who are black, were the founders of ancient Egypt. And why is that important? That's the greatest civilization in the history of the world. None have equaled it. So this show will go into that. My book, The Integration Trap, Generation Gap Caused by a Choice, we between two cultures, did some research on that. And so there's a lot of other areas that we cover as well. Most of our shows are live like this one, so we can get chats and stuff like that so people can feed in and ask their questions. But my main approach is to use our history, to use our culture, whatever, to change the conditions we live under today. Of the African-centered scholars, I'm the only one that's a revolutionary. And so I think future, how do you use the past to change what you're living under now and then the future? And so I have systems that I've developed you use right now. I've used it in the movements I've led. I've never lost a battle. I'm a warrior first. My scholarship comes out of battles. Yes. I don't believe in losing. Losing's a terrible thing. When you fight your opponent for whatever form of freedom, know how to whip them. Don't ever get into the ring unless, I'm using the metaphor of boxing, but don't ever get in the ring unless you know how, the term we use, take your opponent out, meaning how to beat them. And so that's my thought comes from successful struggles and then study. So I'm not one of these defeatist people always talking about, oh, we're losing this, oh, we're losing that. I haven't lost any. And our people here have won battles on Africa's continent. You've won battles. Your greatest battle that you won in the 20th century was independence. Now, we know there's all kinds of problems with your independence, but it's the first step. And don't put it down. Just figure out how you take it to the next level. We defeated Southern segregation and got the right to vote before South Africa did under great odds. And that was a great victory. And a lot of us put that down because people put down Martin Luther King because he was nonviolent. I have two shows on Martin Luther King. One that points out that Martin Luther King was a revolutionary. I brought on a brother named Manu Ampin. He is the foremost authority on Martin Luther King. And we showed that Martin Luther King, like Malcolm X, was a revolutionary. And then we did a show on who killed him. We showed how the U.S. government conspired to kill him. So that's the approach that I use. Use the past to change the present, but also use the past to prepare for your future. I spend more time on the future than anything else. And because if you don't prepare for it now, if, for example, Africa gets to a point of African unity, there's a bunch of things we have to prepare for. If you united these corrupt African states right now, you'd be in a state of trouble.
Correct.
And it's not going to happen anyway. Not yet. So we have to prepare. What are the things we need to make sure that a unified Africa is just? Not just unified, just. Treats people justly. What do we have to do for that? You have to prepare for that. And your university education didn't train you in how to do that either.
Yeah.
Let's be clear about that.
True. It sounds very interesting because what you're saying makes a lot of sense. We also had Baba Jumei Faye, who actually, when we talked about what could be some of the gains of the OAU, and he articulated it exactly like you're saying. It's like, one of the gains that we can look from 1963 was the independence. It is very, very okay to say, yes, we're not doing things perfectly, but at least we gain that, which is already a step forward, then to correcting that. And then the thing that you're pointing here, one thing that you're teaching us here that is very, very important, because a lot of people keep saying, oh, we Africans, we like to dwell on the past. We should just leave the past behind and move ahead. We should forget about this colonialism and slavery. And you see a lot of people questioning the fact, why are African Americans or those in the diaspora always looking back at history? But now what you're telling us, you need to know your history to be able to determine your future, isn't it?
Yeah, well, see, the reason we say that is because when you get conquered, then what happens is your enemy begins to miseducate you. And so one of the first things they did in Africa was to supplant the educational systems of Africa with the European systems, because you had what you call secret societies. You had Pur-Ankh in ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, which meant house of life, which was the highest university system the world has ever known. And so then they brainwash you. In Africa with missionary education, in the United States, somewhat with missionary education and also with higher miseducation after the end of enslavement. And what they teach you is you have no history. They teach you your history is no good. They teach you ours is great and yours is nothing. And so then a lot of us think that if, well, we got conquered by them, our history wouldn't do us any good anyway. You know what I mean? When in fact, all people face setbacks. And in fact, the word slave comes from Slavic. These were the first Europeans to be enslaved. Slaveries existed everywhere. Colonialism. The first people to be colonized by the British were the Irish. They cut their heads off. They would scalp them, you know. The Scots-Irish would do that for them. So that's a colonial mentality. That's a slave mentality. That's a mentality where you're colonized in the mind. You're enslaved in the mind. And that is the way to keep you under control. Because if you don't know the best of what you've been, you're going to reproduce the worst part. And it's going to be the part taught to you, miseducated to you. And that's why Africa's in trouble. That's why we're in trouble, because no other people have been hit as hard by these outside forces. If China had been hit as hard as we've been hit, China would not be standing the way they are right now. And if the Japanese had not been able to come up with the Meiji Restoration, which was to modernize their country while remaining Japanese, they would be under the heel of the West. They got defeated in World War II, but they were also a major power. They challenged the United States and Western Europe, and they rebuilt with Western help. And so they're a major power today. So the thing is, they didn't face what we face. They didn't have a whole continent occupied. They didn't have millions of people enslaved. So us coming back is going to be harder. And it means that we've got to dig deeper into our past to come back stronger. And so if we think our past is not something we need to use, that's because we've been brainwashed. It's kind of like you go into a jeweler and you have a choice between diamond and glass, but you don't know the difference. And you get glass, but you pay for a diamond. And that's what's happening with African people. You know, we're getting glass. You know, we're getting something that's phony. I was miseducated. And it's the awakening that I went through. And the first decision I made was to throw away the method of Western miseducation and also their factual basis, using what was positive, but there wasn't a whole lot. And that's a lot of what we have to do as well. You know, we have skills, scientists, technicians, computer people. We need those skills. But there's a lot of things we've learned, including attitudes towards each other, that are not good, that we need to overturn and going black, as the rappers say, going black to the future. You know what I mean? Drawing from your past and using it to change your condition. That's key.
Good. Prof, what is it that we should know about this female male mother energy to keep this balance of equality? Because that's also one thing in the Liberation Week that we need to talk about. Your book is telling us that we don't have this gender issue that is being brought to us or educated or brought or taught to us by the West. And that's why we keep always wrestling, oh, the man is this, the woman is this.
Yeah, and after that, I want to go back through African Liberation Day and how that ties into what we're dealing with now. Yeah, I wrote a book called Return to the African Mother Principle of Male and Female Equality. And it's in 10-point font, so it's, I don't know, 600 pages, whatever. Close to 500 pages. It's actually about 700 pages because a normal book should be 12-point font. I reduced the size because I figured some Black people have trouble reading a big, thick book. So this book is introduced by John Henry Clark and Dr. Asa Hilliard, but it comes from a vision. So this is the key point. I would often talk to Professor John Henry Clark about Africa and this work in particular. And he would always make a point. One of the things he liked about the Asante people, for example, it's true of many African people, is that there was a consistency between how the family was organized, in this case, the lineage, and how the nation was organized. And I went to Ghana. I've been to Ghana and Africa many times. And when I was doing the work on this book between 90 and 95, I was in Africa a lot doing work on how their societies are organized. And then I'd call up John and share information. And then he would give me something real brief that was really profound. So this consistency. So I went through a period of crisis in my life. 1984 to 1989. In my first marriage, I had some real problems. I was married to a very nice lady for 33 years, and she was active in the movement with me and everything else. But I discovered that she had a problem. 17 years into the marriage, I discovered that she had a problem of delusion, a mental disorder. She thought things were happening that were not happening. Now, in most areas of her life, she didn't have a problem. But in this one area, she had a problem. So, and then I had a bunch of other problems hit me at the same time. Anytime you face a life crisis, they usually come in bundles, not just one. And we're all here to be tested on central issues. I thought I had passed my test. I had gone through an awakening. I led big movements. I'm teaching. I'm okay. But I found out, no, you were put here to learn this lesson. And so I knew that when I realized that my wife had a problem, I had a problem. My problem was that I didn't see her problem. I've been married to her 17 years and didn't see this. I'm an astrologer. A lot of people think that's a joke. It's the best system of character analysis on the planet. And so I already knew I was strong on the masculine and weak on the feminine. I knew that, you know, I knew that. And so what I did is for 5 years, I went on retreats for 3 months, for 5 years, 15 months, looking at myself. I could have gone to a psychiatrist. I don't have any problem with that. But it's kind of like gardening. You know, you got weeds in your garden, you got to pull those weeds up. And I do not use any of those artificial fertilizers and stuff to kill everything in nature. So it's pulling the weeds up. And so it's easy to go to somebody and a head shrink and they give you these ideas. But I'm a spiritual person. I know this is internal work I had to do. So basically what I did was look at the women in my life, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. I looked at how did my view of women shape this blindness, not being able to see weaknesses right before me, because every time the CIA, FBI sent somebody on me, it was almost always a man. I'd spot him. I know how to handle it. But I knew that I had idolized Black women, partially because of my mother. She was like someone that I held in very high regard. And so as a result, things that I could see with a male, I didn't see with the female. So I did these 5 years, 15 months of working on myself. I'd camp out, you know what I mean? And after that, and then I was going through a lot of other crises at the same time. After that, I had put myself back together and I started writing. So I got this feminine side together. And so I started writing this book, Return to the African Mother Principle of Male and Female Equality. And when I first started in 1990, so I'd done 5 years of internal work, and I couldn't write, and I never had writer's block. And so I called a friend of mine, his name is Dewey Crumpler. Right behind me, you'll see two statues. Those are Dogon Numo
Yes.
twins. The first African system that I worked with is Dogon, and I've been working on the Dogon system for a good 20, 25 years. African systems, you have to become what you're learning. It's not just getting information. And African systems align you with the cosmos, with nature. And so I've been working with these principles. And so what you see behind me is a male and female. The male's got his arm around the female. The male's chest is extended, which suggests the feminine. It's like breast, but it's extended. The female, it's hard to see, but she has the beard of a deceased pharaoh, indicating the Kemetic influence on Dogon thought. And so what the Dogon are telling you is that within the masculine is the feminine, within the feminine is the masculine. And their idea is perfection isn't freedom from fault. Perfection is balance between male and female, or masculine and feminine. So I have been working on this for years, and this is what helped me work through 15 months of looking at myself. So my friend gave me this statue. This statue had come from the Dogon, and it was full of spirits. And so I started writing. I wrote 180 pages in 1 month. And I'm sitting in my study one night after having written 180 pages, and I asked myself, what did the Dogon mean by just societies? And I knew when I asked that question, I'm in trouble. I've been in the system 20 years, and I didn't know what they meant by just societies. I'm writing about just societies. So in a state of humility, and this is, for me, my best thinking comes when I pipe into God's mind. And it only happens when it's a situation that's troubling. It's something I've been working on. I don't have the answer, and I'm very humble, and I don't expect to get the answer. And so I asked God, what's the basis of the just societies of Africa? And I had the most beautiful experience of my life. I've had one more, which answers, why are we in the condition we're in right now? That light wasn't as big. And so this experience of the light, God is a white light, by the way. The higher spiritual people all say that. There's a great healer, holy man among the Lakota, Native Americans. His name is Fool's Crow, greatest healer among his people. And these were people that fought strong against the whites in this country. And he would travel and sleep in dreams to heaven. And he would see God, who they call Wankan Tonka. And he said, it's a great white light. Well, this God within us, God's within all of us. There's a great light within all of us. And what you're accessing when you pipe into God's mind is the light of God that dwells within you. And so I saw this beautiful light. I've never had an experience like this before. No words can describe it, but I'm into aesthetics, beauty. I'm a strategist. Strategy is next to God and love. The ultimate art, it's an art of beauty. I have never, and to me, Black women is God's special creation because they nurture life, they bring life into the world. The woman is wise. The African woman is special. And so for me, I'm a great lover of African women. I don't play around. I'm serious. I'm sorry that I haven't. I could enjoy all these women, but I know that if I did, I'd be in trouble. I would have 100 headaches. But all I can say is the light was more beautiful than the finest women. And when I say beautiful, I'm not referring just to physical. I'm talking about the beauty within. More beautiful than all the beauty that I've ever experienced with women. More beautiful than nature, more beautiful than the sunrise, more beautiful than anything I've ever experienced. I experienced self-love. I had good parents. good mother, good father. So love is not any problem with me, but the unconditional love that I felt was unlike any love I've ever experienced. And it was a love that just embraced me. It was the love of God and the humility, the kindness. I've apprenticed under some great masters who are very wise. Not their wisdom can't even come within a very small part of the wisdom that I experienced through this life. And so when I had this experience, and I'm into the Ifa system, I'm not initiated, but it's one of the systems that I'm into. My crowns come from the Yoruba people. My Babalao, which means father of mysteries, he's also an Araba, and that means the second highest priest in the Ifa system. Ifa Yemi, very good. He's kept me alive. I wouldn't be here but for him. He was telling me that, well, when he writes books, it comes from the spirit, like I didn't. I said, yeah, my best ones do too. I said, mine come from the light. He said, that's the way the spirits used to talk to us. They don't talk to us that way anymore. And I know why when I explain what the vision said. So with me, when I have this experience, I don't hear any words. It's telepathic. It communicates without words. And so what God said, when I asked, what's the basis for the just societies? And by the way, if I'm in error, I can make mistakes on this, but I can tell you what I'm giving you right now, there's no holes in it. Because when it comes from God, it's not like the logical mind. It sounds all pretty and everything. And then you find out later, half of it's wrong. There's no error in this. If there's any error, it's me, but it's not God. And so what God said without speaking is this, very simple. It's repeated throughout the book. People call this a thesis. That's a white boy's way of thinking. Thesis is a guess. You hear me? A theory is a guess. This is not a guess. Without speaking, the light said, the just societies of Africa were those where all the males and females were equally empowered to govern every phase of society, period. Now, when God talks to you on your level. This means many things. And over time, I found out many other things that it meant. But basically, what was God saying? The basis of just societies is where you have systems where there's no room for exploitation. And so if you have a system where men have no more power than women and women have no more power than men, there's not going to be any exploitation because ain't nobody got the power to do it. And when I ran that to my mother, who was a straight A student, very smart, she was very wise. She said, oh, this makes perfect sense. This is what I've always wanted. You know what I mean? So the just societies of Africa, I knew when God gave me this insight, I knew that was the Twa. I knew. And no one's figured out that's the basis for how Twa societies operate. No one's figured that out. If you read the anthropologists, the historians, they're not going to tell you this is the basis for how, their societies work. And the Twa are the world's first people. They come into being 144,000 years BC, according to mitochondrial DNA. Research that's been done on the Biaka Twa in the Congo and the Kung or San people of Kalahari Desert. I study both of them in this book. So human beings come into this earth as Twa. They're the first humans. Biaka Twa or San or Kung people, Kalahari Desert. And they give birth to all humanity that comes forward after that. Human beings live in a hunter-gatherer state for 100,000 years. And then African women who were gatherers of wild edible food innovate agriculture. This then gives birth to agricultural societies 100,000 years later. Now they could have innovated agriculture much earlier, but they were living in a society in which there was no slavery, there was no oppression, there was no hard work. It was the ideal plentiful society. Hunter gatherers only have to work at hunting and gathering a few hours a day. The rest of the time is leisure. They give birth to civilization. The term Ma'at comes from their word Masuri. Masuri, which means straight, Maassouri, which means straight and upright, just. That is the foundation of Kemetic philosophy, Maat, Ma'at. The difference is the Twa are almost always just. Other African societies will talk it and sometimes walk it, but the Twa almost always do. They're called the pure people. So the key point is this: the balance between males and females is the real secret basis of the justice of Twa society, along with their connection to the spirit realm, because they are the people with the greatest supernatural powers. From them comes the idea of one God, but it's not like Islam, Christianity, or Judaism, where you're running around trying to convert somebody to your religion. This is the idea that God, they say, is Ilani, Illani, which means force or power. And so what they see is God's force is in everything. So they're in contact with that. So the key point is the Twa basis of just societies, balance of males and females, it gives birth to democracy. The Greeks did not give birth to democracy. The Greeks had what they called democracy of 25,000 males that they picked randomly for a few years, and the rest of the Greeks did not practice this. African people by nature are democratic by nature. And one of the problems with governance in Africa today is the say-so that African people had from the beginning of their history on down until colonialism and slavery was one where the people had a maximum say-so in the running of their society because their families were balanced. And so what you see then is when you move from hunter-gatherer to agrarian societies, the first stage, and we often study the big societies, kings and queens and stuff like that. That's fine. But the first societies didn't have kings and queens, and many of them still don't throughout Africa. They're classless age grade societies. Igbo people, many of them come from societies without kings and queens. So how are things run? All the males and females are equally empowered to govern every phase of society. When I looked at the Asante, they have a lineage system. Originally, Asante people were Bono people, Bono, women ruled. In some cases in Africa, women ruled. But what I found is most of Africa, men didn't rule, women didn't rule by themselves. It was men and women ruling together. As we get out of hunter-gatherer societies, inclining more to the male or more to the female. It's not as balanced as it was in hunter-gatherer societies. But generally, what's called matriarchy in Africa really isn't. In Africa, where the last name comes from the woman, it's usually the wife's eldest brother who's in charge of the family. That's not matriarchy. And in ancient Kemet, it was the brother who married his sister. So he was the older brother marrying his sister. And so then he becomes pharaoh. But the source of rulership came through the woman. And in ancient Kemet, in ancient Egypt, the women ran the agriculture. The women had real power. If a parent needed support, it was the woman who provided that support. You understand? And so this male-female interaction is real key to understanding the nature of African families. So what I did in this book is I took 14 ancient African family systems before Islam and before Christianity. I wanted to look at, so how do these African systems work? And out of 14, 13 fit this model that God gave me. And so when I looked at the Yoruba, I looked at the Asante, I looked at the Swazi. I looked at a whole group of different family systems. On the surface, they look different because that's the way African people are. We get to be very creative in our languages and our terms for God, but underneath, there's a great cultural unity. And so what I found, for example, Swazi, people in South Africa, beautiful culture. The Swazi are a people who are patrifocal. Last name comes from the father. But they have this term in the family where you have the husband who is called the female father and the wife who's called the male mother. That just simply means that the father treats the children the way the woman would. The woman treats the children the way the father would. The masculine is within the feminine. Among the Swazi, the king was in charge of the army, but the army was stationed at the palace of the queen mother, and the queen mother was not married to the king. The king had the high court, but the queen mother had the highest court. Male, female. You understand? And so when I looked at these systems, or the Yoruba are an exception because in Africa, women are almost always the agriculturalists. But among the Yoruba, the men are, you know. But women sell their stuff at the market, men sell their stuff. But when it comes to family, when it comes to inheritance, male children inherit through their father, female children inherit through their mother. So what I concluded was this: African family systems, for the most part, are not matriarchal. African family systems, for the most part, are not patriarchal, meaning women didn't rule the family systems primarily, and men did not rule the family systems primarily. And they were not really matrilineal. Last name come from the mother, but they were not really matrilineal, even though the last name may have come from the mother. Not really patrilineal. So I came up with a new term. Dr. Obinga said this should be in the dictionary. I came up with the term twin lineal. African family systems are by nature twin lineal. All that means is, who are you descended from? Your lineage. You're not just descended from your grandmother. You're not just descended from your grandfather. You're descended from both. You're not just descended from your mother, not just descended from your father. You're descended from both. And if you have a concept of God being physical, which God isn't, but if you do, it's got to be he and she, because it takes two to create something. So twin lineal. So what this means is that these African family systems were really the secret basis for balance, secret basis for justice, along with the spirituality of these systems that pipe into God, that aspired to higher justice, because it wasn't just balance physically, it was the balance, in terms of being in harmony with the cosmos. So those systems still play out in villages in Africa, but due to the way colonialism has worked, it's worked against women. When it comes to crops, for example, the crops that would generally be favored for sale abroad were usually in the hands of males more than females. In the United States, we end up with patriarchy influencing us. So we have Black males who are trying to run everything in the family. But what I found, because since I've done this work on this book, I'm now looking at how have these family systems been carried over into colonialism in the post-colonial period and the post-slavery period. And what I found is Black families in the United States that are really holistic and balanced and loving, they're balanced. And what you have is an interplay of male and female. And it's hard to see because it doesn't have a name. We don't put labels on this. So, for example, when my book first came out, I was working with a brother named Oscar Wright. He's a multimillionaire, owns real estate all over the United States, comes from Mississippi. He and I ran a group called Buffer, Black United Front for Educational Reform. Both of us Leos. And So I'm having a meeting of the Black United Front here in this study in 1995, and Mr. Wright is here. And so I explained the book because I'm going to go to a book signing and I explained the book had just come out. And so I explained to him, Mr. Oscar Wright's from Mississippi. He said, my family's organized the same way. He said, when we got married, we sat down at the table. This is twin lineal because it works in different ways. As long as there's some balance, as long as there's some respect, between the male and the female. So here's how twin lineal worked for him. I'm in charge of what I'm good at. You're in charge of what you're good at. Huh? That's balance.
That's balance.
Yeah. He's good at making money. She was a librarian. And of course, she raised the children. So every time he'd come home with a new piece of property he wanted to buy, his wife would say, that don't make no sense. And he'd remind her, I'm in charge of what I'm good at. You're in charge of what you're good at. You know what I mean? Another case, I was talking to a brother. He came out of a family where the men disrespected the women. He met his wife in Africa. She's a teacher. I remember what he did. And this is how their relationship worked. He said, I recognize that she was at least as smart as me, meaning she was smarter. So the balance was mental, and it's always got to be mental. There has to be respect that undergirds any relationship. And when that happens, then people listen to each other and they learn from each other, My family's a twin lineal relationship. My wife from Barbados, she's younger than me. I'm attracted to women of a different age. My first wife was older than me. This one deliberately was younger than me. Deliberately. I said, because at my age, I didn't want all the problems that would come with somebody who's older. Maybe they're ill, all this kind of stuff. But my wife is very strong. We're two type A's. Most relationships like that don't work. She's the boss. She likes to be bossy. Me, you can't boss me, So to me, it's funny. It's real funny. You're wasting your time. And I consult with her. She doesn't consult with me. You know what I mean? She just goes off and does whatever she wants to do. But me, I'm always consulting. But when I consult, I don't always take her advice. And she doesn't understand that. Oh, why didn't you do what I said? I said, that's not a do what you say thing. This is twin lineal. So we'll take the positive. When it's right, we'll work it. But when it's wrong, we won't. It's because I go to whoever I think has got the right answer. You know what I mean? But the key point is, me, I can't function in a relationship unless my lady's strong. I can't handle somebody you run over. And I don't run over people, but somebody who's quiet, doesn't say anything. Quiet doesn't mean you're not strong, but somebody who just goes along and then later is displeased and doesn't state what they think. So basically, this is the basis for real African democracy. And by the way, all African historians are agreed that the African system of democracy is not majority vote, it's consensus. That's the African way. Kwame Nkrumah, who was a great African leader, he allowed Chancellor Williams to come to his country and write a book called The Rebirth of African Civilization. Now, Chancellor Williams paid for his own research. He mortgaged his house. He interviewed African people, thousands of Ghanaians in the 50s on what kind of society did you want when you became independent? It's too bad Nkrumah did not follow this. It's too bad African leaders have not followed this. The people said uniformly, thousands of Africans, we don't want Marxism. We don't want capitalism. We want cooperative democracy, which means, that whatever businesses you have, they're cooperatively owned, which is communalism, that land, air, and water is shared. Nobody owns it. And it's democratic. The people run it based on consensus. And then the advice that they offered to African leaders was, we want you you know, when you have economic ideas, political ideas, whatever, bring them to us. Get our opinion. And then once you get our opinion and you shape the right ideas, then we can go forward and do something. And so that's been the real problem with African leaders. They've been miseducated under the colonial system. They go to university, whatever, and they end up becoming bullies. They get in office, they're bullies. They're telling people what to do. They don't ask people anything. And they are running countries in which the basis of the economy is agricultural. That's your basis for then moving off to industrialization, which today should be solar and wind. It should not be poisoning the environment. And so they don't know anything about farming, but they're setting up agricultural policies and they're set up for failure. And since the African nation was based, I've heard you talk, I've watched part of your last show. You know, you talked about how it's a market women, you know, that really run the African economy. And you were talking about how your bank was right here.
Yes.
And yes, but a good leader like Gerald Rawlings comes into office in Ghana. He meant well. And what does he do? He starts to have market women beaten because they're setting prices for their goods. And he's talking about the market is a colonial instrument. No, it's not. That's basic to the economy of Africa. And it's women who run it because they're the ones that got the goods to sell. They're the agriculturalists in most cases. And usually in an African market, your goods of the same, you know, if it's certain types of vegetables, they're all in the same area. You can't be putting a price too high and get your goods to sell. You know what I mean? So in African societies, the head of the nation did not determine the economic policy of the nation. The people at the village level did. And that was largely women. And I'm not saying that that's the only way the economy will grow. We're going into other areas, high tech. There's a bunch of other stuff we have to do. But if you don't solve the food problem, which Africa was self-sufficient in food at independence, but these African leaders have messed up these economies by pocketing the money that's coming from the food growers, by putting low prices on goods that they grow, and then putting a lot of the food in the cities benefiting the elite and working against the people. Nkrumah made a big mistake when he came into power, and he's one of Africa's best leaders, so don't let anybody get the idea I'm down on Nkrumah. You would not have Ghana without Nkrumah. I mean, he built the educational system, the medical system, and the electoral system for Ghana. But Nkrumah came into office with a huge reserve coming from cocoa. And it was, you know, the British let him, it was 500 million pounds or something. It was a lot of money then. And he had a choice. And his choice was, would he give the cocoa farmers a higher return for their cocoa than the British gave? He chose to go the British route, but for a good reason. He was using the money to build up the economy. He didn't put money in his pocket. Now, his party was corrupt, so some of the people in his party did pocket money. But the key thing is, his intentions were good, but he missed. And Nkrumah had 2 degrees, one in religion, which he didn't need. African leaders do not need to be trained in religion. That's a waste. You hear me? And most of the time it's going to be in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. But even if it's African religion, you don't need to go to university to learn that. God's within you. Communicate with that. You know what I mean? But his other degree was in economics. So that's good. But the key point he missed was this. If an economy is going to function, the people who are doing the work, this is basic, have to make a profit. By the way, I do business. I'm not just a scholar. I do business. I know something about business. Money, you know, no finance, no romance. But money is not the main thing that guides me. I don't have no love for money. But I do know that if an economy is going to work, people have to profit from whatever it is they're doing. And so that was a big mistake that he made, because then the black market came into being. His mistake was also not to listen to the women, because the women put him in office, the market women, you know what I mean, and other women. So the point is, this twin lineal thing is the basis for creating just governance. You have to rework it. But this Western thing, this so-called Republican thing, these things where you run people for office and they end up being as crooked as the people that replaced them, you know, that they replaced, that system is designed to transfer wealth. That's the John Locke system. I discussed it before. Second treatise on government. That's the system that the British set up. The American system is modeled after that. The French, the German, all these systems, and Africa inherited this. And this is a system where government's set up to protect private property. And private property is basically the property of the wealthy. Africa had no idea of land, air, and water being privately owned. That is a terrible idea. Use it. You had the right to use it. You have the right to your house. You have the right to the money you make. And Africans were into making money, you know what I mean? But not to the ownership of land, because what happens is a few people can get the ownership and then the rest are dispossessed. And that's communalism. That's the African way. And that's a way that we need to go back to, a sharing way, you know? So, but it's the male-female balance that is the key. So I say this, that for Africa to become strong, the most important thing that needs to happen is empower African women. Power African women. Because what happens when you empower African women, if it's economics, they're going to put money into their families. They're going to look after their children. And I'm not saying, I'm not romanticizing. I had to go on 5 years of retreats not to romanticize African women. So I know African women got shortcomings. And by the way, the vision that God gave me, all the males and females are equally empowered to govern every phase of society, I revised that because I knew that in the modern setting, all males and females aren't just. So the formula I say that works now is all the just males and females are equally empowered to govern every phase of society. Meaning that if you're going to put anybody into office, make sure they're just, not just in office, but truthful, honest. In Ghana, and Asante Hina was the one who never lied, one that never turned his back on a war party, the one that never cursed, the one that never disrespected the people. He was the best man. Interestingly enough, African women have never had to stand up to that standard, only the men. Queen mothers did not have to prove that they were the best women, but the men had to. And I think there were good reasons for that, because these men get off in here and want to fight and do different things. So you got to put them in check. So that needs to be, so now in some place like South Africa, you have near balance in their parliament, got corruption. Just because you got balance in office don't mean too much if you don't have just people in office. So Shaka Diop, when he talked about towards a federated African state, he talked about bicameral assemblies, which were made up of males and females equally. I would call them twin lineal, but based on justice, based on truth. But so it's a lot of work we have to do, but it's in us. This is ingrained in us, these ideas. African women have big mouths. That's a part of the democracy of our people. African American women, the same thing. They're not usually quiet. They usually talk. They will give you their opinion. That's good. And instead of this colonial thing where everybody should shut up and one person's in charge, you know what I mean? Whether it's in the family or whether it's at the national level in the assembly, or whether it's in the army with guns, you know? So that's the model. That model has to be worked with. You have to apply it in different ways. We did it in ancient Africa. But that's why we have to use the past to prepare for the future.
Wonderful, beautiful, Prof. Thank you so very much. I know that you have limited time to be with us here. I mean, your show apparently that's supposed to have taken place yesterday was 2 hours, but today you, because of other commitments, you're just here for 1 hour, which is running out. I would just like you to give us a conclusion on the African Liberation Week. What is it, like key points? You already made a lot of recommendations on what it is that everything we have in us is just to maybe, yeah, awaken all these things and put them into a structure. So for the African Liberation Week, we're ending it tomorrow. So what is it that you just want to like, these are the key points that we should have learned and should take forward in this week?
Okay. First thing I encourage people is to check out our show and subscribe. And we're going to do
Yes.
the same thing with people who come to our show, encouraging them to subscribe to Pan African DTV and watch this show, because this show is really about liberating African people worldwide. In terms of African Liberation Day or African liberation, we know that the idea for African Liberation Day came from, we're told, in the African Organization of African Unity, African Liberation Day, came from Kwame Nkrumah. It actually came from George Padmore, who was an advisor
George
to
Patton,
Kwame
yes,
Nkrumah. And his real name was Malcolm Nurse. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story here.
please.
And if Kwame Nkrumah's son, who signed up for my channel, he might want to hear this. Gamal Nkrumah. He might want to hear this. Kwame Nkrumah was educated in the United States, and he would attend study group meetings that John Henry Clark was a part of, and they would joke with him about why was he majoring in religion, but he was also majoring in economics. And he said Kwame Nkrumah had teeth that were so white that they didn't look real. And whenever they would have an argument, Nkrumah, when he figured out how to beat you, he would argue and beat you, and then tap you on the shoulder and say, "I got you, I got you." So after his education in the U.S., he went to Britain right at the end of World War II, and to take part in the Fifth Pan-African Congress. And your listeners probably know that's the most important meeting of Africans in the 20th century, because it planned for the independence of Africa. And Padmore, who came from Trinidad, and the idea of Pan-Africanism comes from the United States and the Caribbean, that we should have one Africa. So Nkrumah came to assist Padmore in that. He was given a letter by C.L.R. James, and I'm going to show you C.L.R. James here in a minute. C.L.R. James, the great historian, he wrote the book Black Jacobins. He's one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism. So he gave Nkrumah a letter. Gamal, if you're listening, I know you don't know this. And as an introduction to Padmore, Nkrumah was smart enough to open that letter. He had to. Because the letter said, "I'm introducing to you a young man named Kwame, and his middle name was Francis Nkrumah." He said, "He's a confused young man, but he has potential. Work with him." So Nkrumah kept that letter. He didn't give it to Padmore. But after Ghana was independent, they had a meeting in Ghana, and John Henry Clark was there. Many of his old friends were there, as well as George Padmore. And Nkrumah pulled the letter out because Nkrumah was a practical joker. And he read the letter. And then he said, "Am I still a confused young man?" And then he laughed. He went, "Ha ha." Meaning, see, I'm running this country, not so confused, you know? So that's a little side story. So we know that the Fifth Pan-African Congress plotted the independence of Africa, and Nkrumah was the first one to succeed in leading an independence movement, the second country in Africa after the Sudan in the 20th century to achieve political independence. Amilcar Cabral called Nkrumah the genius of African independence movements, meaning he led a successful independence movement without shedding blood. So that was important. With Padmore at his side, he got a lot of good advice. For example, Nkrumah would have one day where any person from Ghana could come and meet with him, meet the president in his, his headquarters, which was an old slave castle. And apparently the dogs couldn't sleep there because the spirits were so bad, And he advised him to form the Organization of African Unity. And I heard your guests discuss the different groupings and how it was undermined and all of that. And then Gaddafi comes up with the African Union. So one of the things that they prescribed is African Liberation Day. And African Liberation Day then was conceived of a time where Africans in different parts of the world would come together to support the liberation movements in Africa. So the PAC and the ANC, Pan-African Congress in South Africa, and the African National Congress, SWAPO in Southwest Africa, the movements in Mozambique, Frelimo, PAIGC, Party for the Independence of Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau, and Zimbabwe and others. And so around the world, then, we had what we called African Liberation Days, where we rallied people to provide support for these liberation movements. And so I led that in the Bay Area. We averaged 25 to 30,000 people a year in major rallies to provide support for African liberation movements under a group that I still chair called the Pan-African People's Organization, formed in 1960. So I have a few of our newspapers here to give you an example of this.
Pan-African People's Organization?
Yeah, PAPO. So you see this one here, it says PAPO establishes base in Tanzania. So what we did is we sent work teams to Tanzania in 1973 and worked in the villages in Tanzania. So to my left, you'll see me standing. I'm talking to somebody. We're meeting with a liberation movement, Southwest African People's Organization. So that was part of the work that we were doing. Then we sent people to work in the Ujamaa villages in 74 and 73. You see right here, these are sisters who are working in dukas, which is agricultural projects and also agricultural stores. We worked in those villages for 3 months, sleeping on concrete floors. I lost 15 pounds working in those villages. And then this is the African Liberation Days. This is one of them, 29,000 people. And one of the people that spoke at this African Liberation Day was CLR James. And it's hard to see that, but you see the man with his hand up, that's CLR James. CLR James stayed in my house for a week. This was one of the architects of Pan-Africanism. So what we did is raise money and stuff for the liberation movements. In 1977, I met with Julius Nyerere, president of Tanzania, to report on the work that we had done through African Liberation Day. So we did a film on African Liberation Day and delivered it to him. And then I had a 3-hour meeting with him because we're setting up programs in Tanzania. At the 6th Pan-African Congress, I was chair of the political committee, 6th Pan-African Congress. That's me in the middle with the big natural. To my right is Amiri Baraka, who's a poet. And to my left is a guy with his hand, he's resting it on his head, Owusu Sadakawa. And we were having a debate, Pan-Africanism or Marxism. I beat him. I beat both of them, whipped them. You know what I mean? Because I'm not anti-Marxist, but that's a Western system. It has not worked for them. It ain't going to work for us. Why would we need that when we have communalism? And I'm a revolutionary, so I'm not against. I mean, if the Marxists want to overthrow the American government, I'm not a part of it. But if they want it, I'm not opposing it. That's your business. You know what I mean? So that was African Liberation Day. And that went on until the end of the 70s. I think this Sunday and Monday, I'll be speaking for Pan-African Congress Movement on a program they have, African Liberation Day in the United Kingdom. My organization, Pan-African People's Organization, has worked with theirs now for about 48 years. We hooked up in 1974 at the Sixth Pan-African Congress, and since then, we've done joint African Liberation Days and we've done joint work. My book distribution in Europe goes through Pan-African Congress Movement in the UK, the book distributor, Pepperkai Distributors. People, by the way, you can get my books on Gumroad. If you go to Gumroad, you can buy the book.
Yes.
So, you know, we've had this long relationship. I'm married, my current wife, I met her when I spoke at the 60th anniversary of the Fifth Pan-African Congress in Manchester. And the last house I stayed in was her house. So this is for people who want to know what's the benefits of political work, you can actually get some love out of it.
Exactly. Absolute. You had your queen on the journey of liberation, isn't it?
So final thing I would say is I think the agenda for Pan-Africanism is today obviously isn't supporting liberation movements. It's promoting the unity of Africa, but it's also identifying how, with these nations we have now, how can we convert them into something that's halfway just, if not just? Because if you're going to unify the continent, you can't unify them with a bunch of nations that are crooked as pretzels, you know, that are unjust, that are terrors to humanity, to African humanity. So part of the thing, one of the things we need to do is reconstruct the nation state as it exists under new conditions. And the twin lineal model is like the foundation for that. A system in which the people have the say-so. A system in which, when it comes to what you do with your resources, the people have the say-so. It's not a handful of leaders who have that say-so. So we have to think that through. Otherwise, we will create a national, a Pan-African federation that is not much better than Europe's. Europe is stronger, but Europe is unjust. That's why you've had the Brexit problems and everything else. Germany is basically running what's going on in the European Union. And a lot of people have suffered under this system because, again, you know, you're taking the nation state model, and then what you've done is created a federation, mainly to check the Germans, to prevent them from doing a World War III. But because the Germans have the strongest economy, they end up dictating the terms. So we don't want to imitate what the West has. And by the way, the United States of Africa, we need to change that term. Kwame Nkrumah, when he was writing his books in exile after he'd been overthrown in Guinea, his publisher said, that sounds a lot like the United States of America. And
absolute. Nobody's even adopting that. I think Baba Jume talked about the United African States, not the United States of Africa.
Or something.
That wouldn't even function.
Yeah, something, because the U.S. is not a model for the unification of Africa. And it means that you're thinking too much out of that bag. And Nkrumah's response was, we'll change the name after we get unity. No, you have to do the change in order to get unity, you know? And obviously, and I listened to your speaker that you had on Pan-Africanism. He was making the point that these various nations have to have some power, you know, understanding under any kind of Pan-African federation. It's got to be decentralized. It cannot be everything's at the top. So how does that work? When you have societies that are small, that are products of colonialism, and they're not decentralized. Everything's in one person's hand, you know? So that's what we have to rethink. So that's the issue for African liberation days, and everything else is on in the case of the continent of Africa, how can we be supportive of unification but under just systems? And for Africans outside the continent, how can Africa be supportive of us in the just systems we're working? Because inside the United States, Black, brown, red, and yellow people will be a majority by 2044 in this country. African American culture is the culture that drives change in the United States. And so throwing support behind what we do is important as we throw support behind what you do. And again, it's a question of justice. For Africans in America, our biggest challenge is for us to really know ourselves better, know African American culture. Our conscious people know Africa quite well. The majority of our people don't and need to. But we need to know more about the culture we've created here, because a lot of us think we lost it. No, we didn't. It's the culture of popular choice in the United States, and it is the most complex culture in the United States and probably in the world. And that's why we see a Black Lives Matter movement. That's why you see Latinos, Asians, Native Americans, and white youth rallying behind it. It's the culture of popular choice. And the liberation movement, when it operates on high ideals, is expressing the highest level of the culture. So that's a challenge for us. James Smalls and I, we're buddies because he's a good brother. I like James because he's wise.
And he's watching you. He's watching you right now and giving you thumb ups. I think he should be joining
Okay.
us when you leave. But like I can see, I think he's still busy somewhere. So, but he's live and saying, Prof,
Okay.
good job.
Yeah, well, Smalls and I, we're on the same page because he comes out of South Carolina. He's born inside one of the most strong African-based communities, South Carolina. And so he has a deep understanding of African-American culture, but he's just a nice brother. And for me, character comes first. Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, and we were friends. I led Black Power inside of CORE. He led it inside of SNCC. And we'd always start off discussions with me saying one thing, brother, the first thing about a revolutionary is good character. All that other stuff is secondary. You hear me? You hear me?
Absolutely.
Because if you get some revolutionary in
I
power and he's
hear.
crooked, then, might as well kept the old colonial or the old oppressive order in business, because it's going to end up being a Russian thing. You're going to end up killing people like Stalin did. So your character is the most important thing. And that starts with your family and your relationships. Sisters, the women who are listening, you already know this. You want a good man, okay? Here's the key formula. And brothers, the same thing. The most important thing in a relationship is how much do you have in common with the person you're hooking up with. That's the most important thing, because I hear a lot of brothers and sisters saying, oh, we got a difficult relationship. It's tough, blah, blah. Well, yeah, you have to work on a relationship, but you have to do less work to the degree to which you have more in common with your mate. And
Correct.
so we're always looking at the surface, the physical thing. That plays out after a few months or a year or whatever. That's important, but that's secondary. It's what you have in common. So look at that. You know what I mean? And some of the most successful relationships I know of are people who like themselves so much that they even unconsciously reproduce themselves in their mates. Their mates and them are so much alike, it's funny. That's the easiest relationship. May not be that way, and if it's opposites, but you can work on it, but that's the ideal thing. You know what I mean? And good character, that's the main thing. Good character. You got to trust somebody, respect somebody. That's the key to love. Trust and respect.
Beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Prof. I mean, I don't know how we can be so grateful to you, to all our elders. I mean, the Pan-African Daily TV is absolutely just the melting pot that is bringing us together, and We are so gifted to have you spend time, lecture us, educate us, and we're really thankful. I think Africa, we don't have anything to lose in this century, in this decade. Just getting free education. And what kind of education? Really, knowledge of ourselves, a liberation of freedom, of economic empowerment of ourselves. We are more than just grateful, thankful, blessed at this point in time, Prof. Yeah, so way forward, Saturday the 5th, what is going to happen? Because we would have to have you or stream your show on the Pan-African Daily TV. What will be going on that Saturday 5th?
Yeah, the 5th, we're going to have Dr. Theophil Obenga on, and he'll be on our show at this address. And if we can work it out, we do a joint live stream of that. And so we'll be exploring ancient Egypt and its role in terms of how we can use the model of ancient Egypt or Kemet for creating just societies today and tomorrow. And we'll be covering a number of other things, and over time we'll have him on to discuss other things. This Saturday, tomorrow, our show starts at 10 a.m. in the morning. There's a 9-hour difference between Germany and here, so I think it's 7 p.m. your time.
Yeah, it's going to be 7 p.m. our time, yes, which is also 8 p.m. East African time, and West Africa is going to be 6 p.m. GMT. So it's a good time. It's a good time. I think all of you viewers, you're following up, you've noted it, you set it on your calendar in case, yeah. I mean, we can guarantee that we might, but on the 5th of June, remember, June is already next week, and we're having the Rwanda week, which should be finishing on that same Saturday, but earlier. And so all of us are going to tune in on this exclusive show on Professor Oba TShaka's channel, but would be streamed live also on the Pan-African Daily TV. And the topic is the ancient Egypt as model in creating just societies. And these two powerful, I mean, kings, yeah, Professor Obenga and Professor Oba TShaka. Who wants to miss that? And Prof, we will still have to talk about the links on your books on Gumroad so that we can also share it during the show for people who would have to even do referrals or to click and buy. And Pan-African Daily is putting up that also, that online shop that we're still working on with Professor James Small and you and Dr. Nichols and the others, so that all our followers could easily just download these books, ebooks, or even audios, or see how they can get access to buying this exceptional knowledge. Yeah.
So Sister Tata, I just want to say you keep up the good work and stay strong. We love you, and I see how your show is growing, and I can see why it's growing. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Baba. I think it's growing because of you, because of all the others. It's just a work that all of us, or our God, like you said, brought us together to do it. All of us are doing the same incredible job. By the way, you look so exceptionally handsome, beautiful. As I always say, the cutest.
Well, look at who's talking. You're one pretty lady. You know what I mean? So thank you.
Thank you so much, Baba. Okay. We wish you all the best, and we see ourselves, yes, June 5th on this exclusive edition with you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay. Thank you. As a matter of fact, I should be having Professor James Small join us on this show. I think if he's not in the studio, then I think, yeah, but he was on the show and very, very instrumental in commenting. I could see all the comments that were coming on the show. So I want to thank all of us. We have exhausted almost an hour and a half. Professor Oba TShaka had just 1 hour with us, but we're so exclusively lucky all the time that he has to spend extra half an hour. I know his calendar. He's already on the next show, and they've been tweeting and asking when is he coming. But because of this sacrifice and this dying heart for Pan-African Daily TV, because most of our scholars, they have us in mind that the continent, the continent viewers are actually following. And this knowledge, this in-depth knowledge, is very useful for the liberation of Africans on the continent. And so we are very, very thankful. It's not just a channel where we do news or mainstream. And yeah, but of course, we're going to use maybe this 5-10 minutes just to take some questions or calls or comments. But I want to reiterate on what happened yesterday on the show with Rev Shock. You know, when this young brother called out, and to be honest with you, it is unfortunate. It really was unfortunate. We have to learn how to respond to our elders in case like this, particularly openly. And we begin to ask, where were those cultural ethics and value? And one thing, please don't get me wrong, it's not about an opinion. It's not about that you should not, or anyone should not have different perspective, but it's the way we put it. It's the way you put it. It's the way you drop the message. It could be either smooth or it's really piercing. And yesterday, I think it was not a good idea, you know. But as a matter of fact, immediately after the show, I got in contact with I connected to the brother, and he did actually really apologize for just bumping in like that. And like I said, all of us are coming from so many backgrounds and carrying a lot of loads on us. And we know the Pan-African Daily is not just about learning, but it's also about healing. It's also about healing ourselves. So we should, yes, we should be very patient with one another as well. But of course, be cautious. One of the rules that we had, I mean, it's not my rule. I think we collectively agreed on that rule. Our followers, our viewers, our commentators, put him on the show, our commentators was, this is an educational forum. Of course, we share perspective. So we're having scholars, teachers, mentors, leaders coming. And these are professors that have done a long-term research. Yeah, they invested a lot of time to research their work, and then they come teach us, mentor us, advise us, give us information that no other person would do it. I mean, you can imagine the time that they put, the money, the sacrifice, even coming here to put out this knowledge out here. It's too much, how do I want to say, too much trust and confidence and courage, which a lot of people would not do. And then imagine you out of nowhere, yes, you have a voice, just bomb into the show and just say, no, everything you said was wrong. I think the format in saying that, it's really hurting. So our regulations on the Pan-African Daily TV is, we come to learn. We are like in a classroom, but we are not refusing that your opinion doesn't count. But what we usually thought was necessary is, if you have a contrary opinion, please keep it to yourself. You can contact the professor, you can contact our guests via Pan-African Daily TV WhatsApp number. I would like to get in contact with the guest, and we put you in contact, or you address your concerns to us and we put it over to the guest. And so if there was some misunderstanding or you had a contrary opinion, then we could clear that out. And I'm so thankful to our humble followers and the viewers of the Pan-African Daily TV, who we all have respected that community standard of the Pan-African Daily TV, which is the vision of promoting the African unity, you know, through our voices, through learning our history, our culture, and all that. So please, I just want to officially on the issue of yesterday, apologize to this on the behalf of this guy and of this brother. And also to tell our Reverend Shock that, of course, we absolutely understood everything that happened. And I'm thankful for a lot of calls that came in even after the show to say, oh, please, that was really unfortunate. But of course, that's how we build Africa together. So please, I think we are thankful that Professor James Small is live in studio with us to break up or to cover up the show with Professor Oba TShaka. And this is what we love about our elders, our mentors, you know, putting in, sitting in for one another, just coming in, even announced who wants to be seeing these flyers. And one big step, click your notification bells, please. If you haven't, if you're here for the first time, even if you're here, as a follower, but most of you don't click the notification bell. You're well subscribed. Thank you so much. That's very fine. Click your notification bells. The notification bell, you will see the sign there with this bell. Just press on it. What does it do? It notifies you each time we come live. Why? Because of the constraints, technical setup, and even YouTube and the supremacists try to put a foot on our mouth. And so there are a lot of things that just happen in the background that we can be sharing it all the time with you. So most of the time, it's not even just the technical setbacks. You don't know the challenges we're facing in the background. Of course, some of you understand. But if you press your notification bell, so no matter the delay, whether we come earlier or we come later, because we also have to play one another. And some of our guests now, from what we have learned, will be coming unannounced. So the Pan-African Daily TV is going to operate not just like a social media platform where we tell you we're from this to this or upload videos. No, just click your notification bell. Each time you see us come live, you know it's breaking. It's something the best for you. So thank you, Prof, for being here. I want to welcome you again on this one but last day to the African Liberation Week. How are you doing out there?
I'm good, Sister Susan, and hello to your audience and everybody that's tuned in. All of your support for Pan-African Daily TV. That's what makes Pan-African Daily TV. All of those who are supporting it. And be sure and press that button. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you contribute to Pan-African Daily TV, because she can't do this just out of her pocket in order to bring you this kind of information and this quality of scholarship from around the African world. So we must support our own if it is to continue. That's too important, you know. Yes, enjoy it. Yes, participate, but put some money into it and press that subscriber button so that everyone know you are supporting it. And then tell all your friends about it. Give them the link to get them more involved in supporting Pan-African Daily TV.
Thank you so much, Prof. I mean, of course, big up to you. Your fans are already talking. We have been following up a series of events on the African Liberation Week, but something that is coming up that is very, very, I don't know, it's breaking, is the visit of the French president to Rwanda. The 2 days visit ended today. And next week, we thought of a lot of feedbacks and questions when we posted to do a research about the topic. We realized that many Africans have no idea what happened in Rwanda 1994. Of course, there were a lot of these. The world was not like today. Africans were not actually awoke like today. And so that's why we keep going back to it. So I don't know what you can chip in on that. So we want to make next week from the 1st to the 5th of June, the Rwanda week. So we want to look into this series of genocide, which is one of the most deadliest genocide that ever happened. Okay, we know the slavery, we can't say that is most, but we're talking in the 20th, 21st century, in which the world rose up and say, never again would we see such calamities. But of course, it's still happening in other forms. So Africans are like, what the heck is Macron doing in Rwanda? I mean, are we dining with the enemy? What is His Excellency President Paul Kagame, his intention? We trust his leadership. And so, but you know, this questions in the air is what we want to break down. Over to you, Prof.
Yes, you know, I don't like to frighten and get you kicked off of the air, but the French was part of the force behind the genocide in Rwanda. And you remember for years after Kagame and his government took over, France was even trying to arrest the defense minister, the sister who was number 2 in the country, threatening her. For 2 weeks, the genocide went on. America did not intercede. Britain did not intercede. No one. But they opened a gateway to the Congo for those who were committing a genocide. And then they opened a gateway to Burundi for the French troops who was instructing and guiding that genocide. It took the French 2 weeks to get all of its people out. And then the world was told about it. I was in Uganda actually having lunch with Paul Kagame and a group of our people and his soldiers when the word came that the plane of the presidents from both Burundi and Rwanda had been shot down. We were all together. And of course, I thought I could be an armed revolutionary too, so I jumped on the jeeps with Paul and the others. But after a few miles, he stopped the jeep and threw me out, myself and Abraham Mahosi, and said, somebody need to go and tell the world what we've just found out. This genocide had just begun. And he said, most of us will probably be dead in 2 weeks. So somebody must inform the world. So my brother Abraham Mahosi and myself, we came back to America. And we were the first one to put this word out because the American radio was quiet. Even the OAU was saying nothing. So I sent my organization, the Sons of Africa, to picket the OAU, to come forward and make an announcement, you know? And they finally did, thanks to, I forgot the ambassadors, but he was my neighbor in Harlem. And he just got back in the country and he knew nothing of this. But he made the AAU, step out and make a statement to the world. But the French was a part of the genocide itself. And from the beginning of Kagame's government, it was the French that tried to uproot this government and keep it from getting a footing. So it is strange. We know governments have to deal with governments, and we have to deal with evil governments as well as good governments in terms of world political protocols. So it's worth keeping an eye on. The French have been one of the worst European nations in the colonization of Africa. They're responsible for the death of over 26 of our leaders that they've assassinated, from Sankara to the first president of Togo, to, you just named it, to the overthrow of Gbagbo in Cote d'Ivoire. So we know the colonial contract they wrote with the so-called Francophone states, so that we put 70% of our money in their banks. They make the interest off of it. And if we want to use our own money, we must make it a loan on our own money and then pay interest to the French bank. That's still colonialism. So the French is an enemy of Africa. The French have more troops stationed in Africa than they have in France. You understand it? The French have more military troops stationed on the continent of Africa than they have stationed in the nation of France. Just go to Mali, to Chad, Niger. You'll see that Cote d'Ivoire, you see their filthy military hands. Togo. So yes, we should be concerned, but I have faith in the government in Rwanda.
Yes.
Faith in what they have done under Kagame's leadership, because it's not just him. You know, Rwanda's parliament is more than 50% African women.
Mm-hmm.
Speaks to the strength of that government. So I have faith in that government that France will not make any headway in trying to subjugate them. Mm-hmm. Nor will Rwanda become a collaborator with France in its criminal colonial crimes that is conducting in Africa right now. We're not even sure that they weren't behind the killing of the president of Chad, you know, because with all of his problems, he was fighting the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Imagine you have a nation that have oil and the World Bank say, yes, we'll loan you money to buy the drills and to develop your oil, but you've got to put your money all in a European bank and we control it. And we'll tell you how much you can have. And we'll tell you what you can spend your money on. And we'll tell you what percentage of it you will get. That's the kind of filthy deals they make under duress with our countries. And many times our leaders don't go in corrupt, but they come into government and they become a part of a corrupt international European economic system. And it's hard to unhinge yourself from that. So my faith is in Rwanda. My faith is in the government of Rwanda and the people of Rwanda, who's not going to let anybody, the French, the Americans, the Brits, or anybody, put them back under colonialism and slavery. So we shouldn't be insecure.
Yes.
He would meet with a head of state that is an adversary, because the French have been the greatest adversary to this government from its inception.
Another question. Yes, another reflection is coming back in terms of we also saw this visit of the Chinese delegation in Tanzania, and one of the items that actually struck the opinions on the public or on the social media was the Chinese or the cantons as a language that was proposed, for East Africa. Of course, I know anyone makes his position in a negotiation deal. And that has caused a lot of concerns when we are still in an economy or in a continent where we don't even have a single language, a common language of understanding on our own. And now it's the same question. I mean, Rwanda, through its constitution, actually, remove French as the official language, one of the official language of the Rwandese, and even in the constitution. Now the concerns again are like, do we think that could resurface again, like one of the terms of negotiation?
If you don't, I'm sure it will. If you do not know the past, you're destined to repeat it. I think Rwanda is smart enough and understand French colonial behavior enough that they will not have a difficulty neutralizing whatever the French is coming to beg. They have nothing to give Africa. They're beggars. They're beggars with guns. They're beggars with international banking, using international banking as a weapon. Africa needs to begin to hurriedly move towards an African central banking system so that we can determine the value of our own currency continentally. Right now, we allow the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which are nothing more than arms of colonialism run by America, Britain, France, and Germany, to determine the value of our currency. And they always devalue our currency, even though we have all of the natural resources, which makes no sense. There's no logic to that whatsoever. And so African Liberation Week that you're now celebrating, a part of our liberation has to be the economic liberation and the cultural liberation. Because if we don't get economic and cultural liberation, the political liberation has already proven it doesn't matter. It is worthless. Without the economic and especially the cultural liberation, the political liberation is meaningless. And we've already seen that for the last 50 years. Okay? The wealthiest nation in the world. We send hundreds of billions to Europe, and they give us a few million and say, oh, we're giving you aid. Who's aiding who? If you cut off the money that the so-called Francophone states is putting in the banks of France, the entire economy of France would collapse overnight. It would collapse. Europe don't have the wherewithal to support it. They are armed robbers with their nuclear weapons and their biological weapons and their tactical troop and their machines and their drones. They're a bunch of armed robbers. That's all. Wearing fancy suits, flying in on fancy airplanes, a bunch of armed robbers. They have nothing. Where's the French platinum mine, gold mine, diamond mine, oil well, cobalt, coltan, tungsten? Where is it? They have none. We have it all. But we've allowed the criminals to twist our minds. with their political ideology and their Western religion and their deprivation of African religion and African spirituality and African culture. How can you say I'm an African and I'm liberated if your religion belongs to the enslaver and the colonialist, your culture belongs to the enslaver and the colonialist, your language belongs to the enslaver and the colonialist, the curricula that's educating your children is put in by the slavery and the colonialists? How are you liberated? Liberated from what? So African Liberation Week, thank you, Sister Susan, is making a statement that African liberation is yet to happen. It's for this generation of our youth to declare, I want to liberate my mind. That's what the word freedom means. Freedom, from the Greek, to free, to liberate. Dome, the mind. So when someone said, I want freedom, you're saying, I want to liberate my mind. So if you want to liberate your mind, you must get the other man's language out of your head. You need to know it for the sake of knowing them. But that cannot be primary in the way you communicate in your nation and your continent. Okay? Mm-hmm. You need to get his religion out of your head. Our people left us a spiritual understanding of the universe and the cosmos and nature that worked for us until they came in and crumbled it. You see? Remember, I read something when I was on with Omawale Clay. I like to find it and read it again because this is important. We need to really, truly understand the war we're fighting. It's not just a physical war. It's not just a political war. Matter of fact, those are the least strategic of the war we're fighting with Europe. The most strategic war we have with Europe is a culture war. Without his cultural dominance, he would never be able to have economic dominance in Africa. And we have to be clear about that because Europe is clear about that. I want to just, let me read this to the audience again.
Yes.
Now, this is Lord Macaulay, and he's addressing the British Parliament on 2nd February, 1835. Listen to this. I have traveled across the length and breadth of Africa, and I have not seen one person who is a beggar, who is a thief. Such wealth I have seen in this country, such high moral values, people of such caliber, that I do not think we would ever conquer this country. And he's talking about Nigeria at the time. Unless we break the very backbone of the nation, which is her spiritual and cultural heritage. Okay? They made this declaration in the 1800s that this is the goal, that we must destroy Africa culturally. That's why if you go to the British Museum, most of the art in the British Museum comes from Africa. Most of the art in the main German museum comes from Africa. Most of the art in the French museum comes from Africa because they raided our sacred place, our spiritual place, our temples, and stole everything. They raided our villages. They burnt down our sacred groves like they did to the Igbo in Nigeria. They couldn't defeat the Igbo. This is, why can't we defeat these people? And they said, oh, because these people, these Igbo, they don't have any standing temples. They found out that they commune with their ancestors and their spirit in the sacred forest. So the British just set the forest afire and burnt it down because they understood if they do not win the spiritual war and the cultural war, they can never conquer the African, because freedom is a liberated mind. Freedom is a liberated mind. The very word itself means that, okay? And your mind is not liberated if you're speaking the other man's language as your primary means of communication, if you're worshiping his God, if you're participating in his religions, if you're participating in his state ideology, if you're participating in his notion of the nation state, if you're participating in his concept of psychology, you're his slave. You're not free. So I can give you all the political power I want. You will always work it in his interests because you are him in blackface. You are her in blackface. And so we got to make things simple and plain. There's nothing complex about what's going on here. We have to return, and we talked about this when we first met. We must return to the ways of our ancestors. We honor our mothers and our fathers, not honor his mother and fathers. His mother and fathers were the murderers and the rapists and the genociders of our mothers and fathers. So if we honor his mother and father, then we become the murderers, the rapists, and the genocider of ourselves. That makes common sense, because this is simple. I'm an African. No matter how brown my skin is, or how many generations I've been in America, or how pissed off I may get with some of my brothers and sisters sometimes and cuss them out on the sidewalk, and everybody know I'll do it. I am an African, born to be that, will die out of this body as that. While living in this body, I will fight only for one thing, the liberation of the African mind, so he can liberate his behind from colonial and slavery dominance of the European and the Asians. The Chinese in Africa, when they first started coming, we were lauding them, oh, they're going to be better. One murderer is no better than the other. One colonizer is no better than the other. One thief is no better than the other. You know, only Africa will save Africa. Only Africans will save Africa. Nobody from outside of Africa is going to save Africa. The Africans of Africa must save Africa with the African ways of life, the African value system, the African world view, the African cultural construct, the African political construct. I think it was my professor Akinjobin from Nigeria who taught me when I was in the university, and he said, listen, culture is not static. You know, culture is fluid. So there's some things in the culture that may not work anymore, so we set those things aside. And then we create new things to take their place. But the idea of culture is to protect the people from genocide. And when you don't have your culture, you're being genocided by somebody else's culture. So don't take culture lightly. Culture is not dancing. Culture is not singing. Culture is not playing musical instrument. Culture is not drama and theater or poetry. Those are the tools that culture uses to teach the concepts, ideas, and principles that will unite a people around controlling the economic, politics, and culture that will provide them the food, clothing, shelter, and safety for themselves and their families. I say this 1,000 times, and I don't think people really get it, because it's not complex. I get hungry at the end of the day. I must eat, meaning I must be able to provide food. Given my environment, I need clothing. I must have a means of producing it. I need shelter. I must have a means of producing it. So then I should control the wealth in my land, not sit at the port in Takoradi in Ghana and watch barge after barge of the manganese drive into these big ships whose doors open and take in the water and let them just drive the barge in full of the stones of manganese, taking it away someplace to be processed, to make money and give jobs to European and to build wealth for them, while we get menial jobs mining it with no health insurance, no nothing at the end of the day. So our wealth just left our nation and built Paris and built London and built Antwerp and built Berlin and built Rome and built New York and Chicago. And we're sitting scratching our heads, so wait, we have all the wealth. They have none. But somehow the political arrangement, when it's flipped, all of our wealth is helping them to build. And they're laughing at us, putting us on TV with no clothes on, with dirty clothes, with flies in our face, and saying they send some ship to help us with medicine. What the hell? When is it going to stop? When we decide that the word freedom means a liberated mind. The word freedom, free to liberate, dome the mind. And you cannot liberate your mind unless you return to your culture, your values, your spiritual system, your sacred science. You cannot liberate your mind unless you learn to love your ancestors and learn about the sacrifice they made for you and hold them up as the models for which you're willing to die to make a better future for your children. So this liberation movement haven't even begun. We've only hit the first stage with the armed revolution. We drove them out. But look at Mozambique. Look at Angola. We drove the Portuguese out by the barrel of the gun. Now they're all back. And the governments, they're saying, oh, well, we've allowed them to have work permits because they have the skills and the technology we need. So your people sit there unemployed. And you bring the former colonial children back to now run your country under the guise that they got skills and technology. What the hell happened to your building the university that would teach your children the skills and technology that's needed? So when we talk about liberation, it's just begun. And it's real right now, real time. We have to be the liberators. We exalt the great men and women of the past, and we use their spirit to propel us to be the liberations and the liberators of now, so that our children will continue the liberation into the future, because we're not liberated. We're not free. And dancing on YouTube, and I love dancing to Jerusalem. That's a beautiful music, but that's not good enough. I don't care who's dancing over the music Jerusalem all over the world. Give me my money back.
Yes.
Give me my control of my country back. Go home, unless you've come to Africa to help me build an Africa that the Africans want to see, then get on a plane or ship and go home and leave us alone. And we've got to be clear on that. Oh, we love everybody. How the hell can you love everybody? You don't even love everybody in your own family. But when it comes to the enemies, oh, we love everybody. We've got to embrace the world. Well, the world is not embracing Africa. They're robbing Africa. They're disgracing Africa. Our people, for the sake of a few dollars, is dying by the thousands in the Mediterranean every year. In concentration camps in Libya, being used as slaves every year for the sake of needing to make a few dollars when they just left the wealthiest country in the world. So African liberation is a process that we are now engaged in. And the greatest liberating tool is the mind. I think it was Stephen Biko who said it, our beautiful son in South Africa. Stephen said, the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. They murdered and butchered him, bust his brain open out of his head, came to court in that reconciliation foolishness in South Carolina, confessed to having slaughtered that child, and was allowed to walk away and go home free. Oh, Bishop Tutu, whatever heaven you went to, you will have no peace, my friend. You will have no peace. Okay.
Prof, this is very important what you're saying, because even when we look at Germany in the 1800s, when the French defeated, and now Germany became a territory of French, Russia, and America, which is partitioned. And the only thing that Germany could gain its autonomy and power was to redefine the identity of German. And they call it the Germanhood.
Yes.
And so just identifying their culture and their value. Who is a German? What is a German? This key factor is what has made Germany, despite all the wars and everything, to become now the strongest economy, bailing out countries even like Greece and others, and even France.
Yes.
And now, so this key component, like when we're talking and we're discussing this, it's even also nice to just look at a small country like Germany, almost 80 million. Congo is 1 point, Cameroon is 1.3 geographical square meter bigger than Germany.
Right.
Right.
But we're giving them all of our natural resources to build Germany.
Exactly.
Build France. We could build Cameroon. You know?
That idea of an identity is what actually struck me, is the research that we're currently really going on. Like the key components, like you're saying, is our culture, our identity. Who is an African? And when we get
true liberation,
yes,
and I've said this before, is to be bonded to your identity. True liberation is to be bonded to your identity. Okay, as an African. You know, we look up to everybody. Oh, the Chinese, he's got his kung fu and his martial arts, and they play that identity symbolisms on us, and we buy that. The British, and they've got their military and their poetry and their literature, and the Germans and so forth. But what is it that we say is our essence? It is our very humanity, which they've all borrowed from. But we drop our humanity by the roadside to grab on to an imitation of us, to be a hologram of an imitation of the African essence. No, we must return not to the imitation, not continue to be a hologram of the European imitation of Africa, but we must return to the African essence itself. Love your mother. Love all of the men and women who died to keep us free. Love Sechuweya. You know, somebody said, who is Sechuweya? And I know the average Black person don't have a clue who is King Sechuweya. Remember in British history, they talk about Robespierre, the Prime Minister of Britain, and how his government collapsed. But in British history, they don't tell you the government collapsed because Sechuweya defeated the Britons so badly at a battle of Islamabad in South Africa that the British were so upset with the Prime Minister for taking such a defeat, they threw him out of their government. Did you know that's your history? Do you know Bambata and the defeat he put on the British in trying to protect us in South Africa? Do you know Muhammad Ahmed, when the British general, what was his name, Kitchener, or whatever, Gordon, came to the Sudan with 23,000 Turkish and British troops? Ahmed, the African leader of Sudan, sent them back home with 3,000. And they had recordless rifles, and we had spares and bows and arrows, but we had Africa in our mind, and we defeated them. Do they teach you that in history? Do they teach you that when the Italians came into Eritrea and expanded into Ethiopia, how Menelik took on the best force the Italian had ever sent abroad and crushed them because they knew they were Africans? Got to get back your mind. We lost our minds to whiteness. We lost our minds to Christianity. We lost our minds to Islam. There is an African way of knowing the world. Find it. It's in your history. There's an African culture, the most beautiful in the world. You go anywhere in the world, our culture is the dominant thing. but they'll water it down and innovate on it and then present it as though it's their dance. They're doing that now with the music, Jerusalem. You hear the song now is being sung in English by whites. They've taken our dance and they've modified it to 1, 2, 3 glide steps to the side and 2 step back, and we think it's real. That is a poor imitation of you. And if you imitate that, you become a mere hologram.
Oh, yes.
Imitation of yourself.
It's a shame. It's a shame.
But using just that little thing show you the big thing. Our culture is a set of rules and values we must relearn on how to be human beings one to the other, and how to protect our human beingness, how to protect nature, how to participate in nature, you know, how to guard ourselves against genocide. As the British man says, we will never defeat them unless we take away their spiritual system and their culture. And they've succeeded to a great degree in doing that. But they haven't taken it, because every village still have it. Even the communities within the cities are villages. And we in our courtyard, we still practice it. But we have to bring that out as our primary personality. The family stool can no longer just be the family stool. The family skin can no longer just be the family skin. We can't just go secretly into the groves, the forests and the groves no more. We've got to bring these things up front and say, this is our character. This is how we look. This is how we think. This is what we believe. You have an ideology. We have an ideology. And it is not Marxism nor capitalism. It's Africanism, which we are now calling Pan-Africanism. And it is based on our ancestral tradition, which is the tradition of being godly and human in one package.
Ashe.
Go on, girl. Say Ashe again. Asheo.
Asheo, yes. Thank you so much, Prof. I mean, wow, you're making everything, and we're thankful. We're grateful for today. You just coming in, even, without program, to share this wonderful knowledge with us. We're thankful, Prof. We're so thankful. Now, are you going to be with us tomorrow?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tomorrow,
I wanted this confirmation.
We're going to be more timeline. We're going to look at the timeline of the African liberation struggles.
Yes.
Starting with the Berlin Conference to now.
Okay. Good.
Just looking at those liberation movements, the timelines, the leaders that rose, those who were assassinated, the robbery of Africa, but the great resilience of the African youth. Let me be clear. When I watch TV and I watch all of the social media, African youth is struggling and fighting to bring this culture back. We just have to help them see it in the context it needs to be. It's not something where you say, oh, we're all the same. Come on in with us. No. Everybody can't go into the sacred space. Everybody can't enter the inner sanctum of our African ancestral spirits. Only we can do that. And if we want to share what we have when we come out, we will do it with the caution to protect the integrity of our greater society. But we alone should enter the inner sanctum of our ancestral spirits. Because they've made us think it's nothing. It is the most powerful tool we've got. And you can leave it on the ground to gather dust and the enemy will walk all over you. But when you pick it up and wipe it off, you will see the love of your ancestors for millions of years saying, whatever power you need, I will give it to you intellectually. And you manifest that into your actions that will lead to the liberation process and the owning and the sustaining of Africa by Africans for Africans. Period.
I hear. So tomorrow we're going to treat the timeline of the African liberation.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So we see ourselves tomorrow. People, now you're already hearing that. Tomorrow we are having two, I can say two seminars or two lectures tomorrow. We have Baba Ratio, who is also coming to give us the mathematic formula and to even give us an idea about Africa's debt and how we can calculate these things, right? And then we're also having now this seminar with Professor James Small on the timeline. I mean, so tomorrow we're going to do.
I'll be your closer. You know, you always have to have a closer, even in war. If we were on the battlefield and you defeated the main army, you're gonna have a good sniper to do the closing.
Exactly, just like you're doing today. Thank you so much. Yes. All right. So we see ourselves tomorrow at the same time. Yes, we're gonna start a little bit earlier with Baba Ratio, and then you close the show with the timeline like today. So thank you so very much, Prof. Yes, we see ourselves.
Peace and blessings to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And to you all our followers and listeners, and thank you for the subscription. You know, it's like Professor James always has to come here to remind us that we need to subscribe, we need to support. Thank you so much, Prof. I mean, for that shout out. We also had a sister yesterday, and everybody is just doing the best that they can do. We need it. We need it in every format, you know, to keep the show running, to keep ourselves running, to keep every technique and everything in place. We can't take. We've been having proposals from, you know what I mean, extremists, even to buy us or to fund us. No way. We're just gonna, you know, manage our funds coming from us to us. So thank you so very much. Thank you. We see ourselves tomorrow, same time. Two very powerful lectures are coming up tomorrow. Baba Ratio is going to give us the formula of calculation that the African has never had. And he is the best. We heard it from Rev Shock yesterday. He is the best on the planet. No other. And did you know he's an African? You see, these are all the things that has been hidden from us, and we keep worshiping and glorifying and thinking that the African knew nothing, that we were busy climbing on trees and you know and I don't know what. Yes. So we see ourselves tomorrow, people. Thank you so very much. It's been a wonderful day to share this exclusive moments with us, and all these days we cracked the 3 hours. Tomorrow we're going to do extra hours, so come prepare. It's already a Saturday, and Sunday we are off, Monday we are off, so we have enough time. So come prepared, keep yourself, take your notice and everything, pen and paper, and we're going to be very attentive. Probably we're going to do a 3-4 hour show depending, but we are fit for it because we need it. We need this knowledge. We need it as much as possible, in as much as we still have our elders and our scholars here to give us a lot of information. Hey, it's a whole day school. Very soon we'll start opening for 5 hours. Yeah. And it's a whole university of the Kemet and the liberation minds of the Africa. Thank you so very much. We see ourselves tomorrow. Blessings. Bye. You are watching the Pan-African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tata. The Africa we want: unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home. Join my voice. Join my team. Join my campaign. Campaign 21 # 1 million subscribers on the Pan-African Daily TV YouTube. Be a volunteer. Apply now. Be the new Africa.